there are roads you only learn because life won't let you stand still. You take a step that looks impossible, then another, and the air doesn't break around you like you feared. The map is mostly blank, but your hands remember something your mind forgot. How to balance against emptiness, how to lean toward a future you can't see. Some journeys don't reward you with speed, they reward you with staying. He was called Ivor Lane, born in a heat-blurred border town where the horizon looked like a stove coil. The hospital had desert dust on its window screens and a vending machine that ate nickels. Ivor came into the world missing most of his left leg, and the nurses tried to keep their faces quiet while his mother counted his fingers and kissed his strange perfect knee. She named him after her grandfather, a farmer who had held a plow through locust years and a long drought, who believed that showing up was already a kind of victory. They lived in Rook, Arizona, near a highway that sang when semis went by. His mother, June, stacked shifts at a roadside diner called the Comet, and sometimes cleaned rooms at the Motel Blue to keep the electricity humming. When he was little, she taught him how to listen to wind like it could talk. "It's telling you where it's going," she'd say, squinting toward the low mountains. "If you lean into it, it'll hold you up." The first time Ivor put on a prosthetic, he was 9 and furious. The thing pinched and sweated, and didn't care about his tears. The man from the clinic, and why was it always a man, said words like alignment inflection, like the language of a door hinge. June pulled his hair back with her hands and said, "We're not making this leg love you. We're making it fear you just a little." And he laughed, and the laugh let him stand. At school, there were boys who never said a word about it, and boys who said too much. He could feel both kinds when he walked down the hall, the silence and the noise. He learned to carry himself like someone who had a secret that wasn't sad. He learned to grip his crutches just tight enough not to squeal rubber against tile. He learned to go quiet when he was angry. In high school, in a squat gym that smelled like detergent and old Triumph, Ivor found wrestling. A coach with a country preacher's voice handed him a pair of headgear and said, "You got hands like vices and a back like a bridge. You want to see what you can hold?" Ivor nodded without word. On the mat, he discovered the mathematics of pressure, the speakable truth of balance, the way a shoulder could be a fulcrum and a breath could be a lever. The first time he won, the crowd didn't know how to clap for the beautiful math of it, so they clapped for the story they thought they saw. He accepted their noise and held his own story in his chest like a worn coin. At home, June remarried a man named Ray Fulton, who worked off and on for a stucco crew and wore his hat backward like a boy who had never agreed to grow up. Ray could charm a waitress and frighten a dog. He never pushed Ivor in public. He saved his pushes for the kitchen, the narrow hallway, the throat of night after too much beer. The worst thing he said casually, "I'm not your father," as if Ivor had asked for one. June kept pictures in coffee cans in the pantry, as if memory had to be preserved with something sweeter. In one, Ivor at 6, face wild with joy, riding a carousel horse with the prosthetic buckled and bright. In another, June and Ivor on a blue couch, his head in her lap, her eyes half closed, like a prayer that had found its answer, and then let it sleep. She pulled those cans down only when the house felt dangerous, and they would sit on the floor and sift images, like people sorting through a deck to find the card that could change everything. When colleges began to notice Ivor, it came in unexpected forms: emails signed by assistants, a folded letter with a hawk logo, a phone call that cut in and out over wind. One program made a film about grit and sent him the link. Another told him they admired his inspirational character, like it could be hung in a museum. It was the coach from Copper State University, though, who wrote him something that felt human. "We compete hard, we don't pity. If you come here, we build you like we build bridges. Strong where it counts, no promises beyond work." Coach Solace Ivor printed the letter and kept it under his pillow. He told no one. Rook had a single movie theater whose sign never quite had the right letters. It was always showing a film called San, Am, Ong, or EFOT. On a night when the wind had the taste of copper in it, June and Ivor sat in the back row and shared a soda that had too much ice. "College," June said softly, like she was afraid the word might take flight. "It's a thing that happens to other people until it happens to us." He ran his thumb along the cardboard of the cup. "What if I'm not what they think I am?" June smiled without showing teeth. "Then you'll be exactly what you are, let them adjust. He graduated standing tall, mortarboard tassel caught in his eyelashes. In the photo, someone else's balloon floated into the frame and made it look like the day had a speech bubble. The morning after, he packed his duffel, kissed the doorway where his head had scraped paint for years, and climbed into a borrowed car with a windshield crack like a river. June pressed a $2 bill into his hand. "For luck," she said. "And for soda." Copper State University sat in a copper light. The campus was all glass and pale stone, and trees that looked imported from a place that remembered rain. The wrestling room was a square of sweat and old victories. A place where time had layered itself into the mats. Coach Salas shook his hand and squeezed, measuring something not quite strength. "Tell me who you are," the coach said. "Ivor Lane," he said. "Tell me who you are when it hurts," Salas asked. Ivor swallowed. "The same, I hope." Day one was more science than sport. Stance, posture, contact. Beam your weight through the places you have. Don't waste time wishing for more. Find your center and dare it to move. There were 50 to something kids on the first day and 22 spots when the season lit up. Salas didn't scream, he repeated. "This is a room of equations," he would say. "Write yours until it balances." The other wrestlers watched him without cruelty mostly. A few looked at him like he might be their good deed, if they let him win a scramble. They learned quickly. Ivor wasn't interested in anyone's quota of compassion. He was a study in angles. He learned to run one crutch like a metronome between sprints, to tie his laces faster than boys with 10 fingers, to wrap his stump in tape, until the skin looked like a comet tail. He learned to fail and not walk off, to stand in the corner with his hands behind his head, and breathe until the room came back. At night, he cleaned treadmills at a gym called Night Owl, where the radios were always tuned to stations that argued. He squeegeed mirrors until his own face looked like a rumor. An older woman with a towel over her shoulder would always nod to him on her way out and say, "Keep showing up, honey." She said it like a recipe, not a blessing. The first letter he opened in the hallway, hands shaking enough to tear the top in a ragged sigh, came from a school he'd loved since he was 10, because they were the color of wheat. It was polite and unambiguous. "We are unable to offer you." He folded it back along its first fold and tucked it in his shoe. The roommate he barely knew clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Their loss," which made Ivor want to run until the world had no nouns left. He told Coach Salas. Salas listened like men do when they've learned to keep their mouths shut. "Wheat's a hard color to live in anyway," the coach said. "Ours is better. Looks like the inside of a penny." He grinned, then sobered. "You're good, but good is a place you pass through." At home, June kept her mouth on a firm line, the shape she used to push back tears without letting them fall. Ray had left and then come back, and then left again, like weather that never took responsibility. He apologized when he returned, brought flowers that smelled like nothing, and held June's hands in the living room while the kids pretended not to stare. That night, Ivor lifted in the backyard under a porch light that drew moths like paper prayers. He didn't look up when the door opened. He knew who it was by the sound of silence. "You think you're better than me," Ray said, and it wasn't a question. "I think I'm me," Ivor said. "You don't know what being a man is," Ray went on. A script he'd learned by heart. "A man puts food down. A man makes money with his hands." Ivor lowered the bar and sat up, chest burning. "A man doesn't make a house scared." Ray laughed, then turned it into a cough that smelled like beer. "Big words," he said, and walked inside. The door closed quietly, which was somehow louder than a slam. The next morning, the team climbed a small mountain behind the stadium, a pile of red rock that looked harmless from a distance. Someone slipped near the top and cursed the sky like it could be shamed into forgiveness. Ivor took it steady, hands on stone, breath measured, the prosthetic creaking a little like a tree in wind. "You want a rope?" A teammate called back down. "I want my own pace," he said, and kept moving. By the time he reached the lookout, the first ones up were already chewing granola and arguing about music. Coach Salas stood apart with his arms crossed, eyes on the valley like it was a body he was learning to heal. He didn't say anything when Ivor touched the rail and turned to the town. He just nodded once, like a man giving permission to himself. Cut day arrived with a hard sun and a softer voice. Salas gathered them, all 50-something, and said, "This isn't judgment, it's numbers. 22, that's what the money holds." He read names with the care of a man cleaning a wound. When he said Lane, the sound broke inside Ivor's chest, like a twig you didn't mean to step on. He walked home slower than he needed, the sky turning orange in strips. June met him on the porch, wiping her hands on the towel, the way she did when she needed time to decide which face to put on. He told her he'd made it, and she nodded like yes and amen and okay, and finally. "You're not fated, baby," she said soft. "You're chosen by work." That year was the first time I ever learned how a program could fail the way a lung fails. Not from disuse but from something like economics. There was a meeting where administrators with soft hands explained money as if it were weather, unchangeable, and nobody's fault. The team would continue, they said, but smaller and tighter, like a belt on a hungry man. Scholarships would be cut. Some boys would be asked to give their shares back so the team could breathe. Salas didn't posture when he told them. He set 2 mason jars on the table in his office. One had a piece of tape that said yes, the other said no. "This is as fair as I know how to make it," he said. "We keep the room alive, or we let the room die. If you have money you vote, unanimous or nothing." Ever stared at the jars as if they were old friends. His own scholarship had never been real. He worked at Night Owl and tutored kids in English, and ate whatever had a coupon attached. He waited in the hallway and listened to coins fall. The sound was a strange music, like rain in a place that didn't get any. After a long while, the door opened, and the boys he sweated with emerged, quiet, eyes turned to the ground, or the ceiling, or each other. One of them, Mason, who had a laugh like a door squeak, shoved Ivor's shoulder, not hard. "Don't make this weird," Mason said. "You're ours." Salas called him in and showed him the jar. Yes was full. It was heavy enough to need 2 hands. "They did that for the room," the coach said. "Not for charity, for wins." The season built itself like a lean-to, one slat at a time. Early matches were in small gyms that smelled like mop water and mustard. He won some and lost some, learned how to leave both kinds on the mat. His rival appeared on screens and in murmurs. Cole Maddox from Prairie U, unpinned since youth, jawline like a cautionary tale, a kid whose father had wrestled him before he could spell the word. In interviews, Cole spoke with a clean confidence that made some people love him, and some people hope he might slip just once. "I take care of business," Cole said into cameras that loved his teeth. "I don't make excuses. I don't even read them." When they first met late that winter, in a tournament named after a donor who owned half the dealerships in the state, Ivor shook his hand and felt nothing but a hand. The crowd made a wet roar, the kind that means money and hope and fear. Cole moved like he'd never learned fear as a language. Ivor made 2 bad decisions fast. The kind that come when your lungs know they're being watched. Cole finished clean and quick. The air emptied out of Ivor's chest in a sound the old men in the top row could hear. Coach Salas sat beside him in the tunnel. "You ever drown?" he asked. "No," Ivor said. "You just did," Salas said. "But look, you're breathing. That's interesting." He slept badly. At Night Owl, he scrubbed elliptical arms until his reflection looked like a photo taken through rain. A man in a suit ran at midnight with no music, face set in a private discipline. "You a fighter?" the man asked, not looking. "I'm learning to be a listener," Ivor said. He got better. "That's the boring truth. Nobody wants to hear." He tuned the machine of himself by a quarter turn each day, skipped nothing, cheated nothing, found ways to make the world heavier. He trained the leg he had like it was 2. He trained his hands until they were their own answer. He learned to stop fighting gravity and start talking to it. He learned to hear when his body asked for more, and when it asked for mercy. At home, Ray returned like a cold front when the bills stacked too high. June wore pride like a coat with thin lining. It kept out some weather, but not all. One night in late spring, the kids were on the porch because the living room had turned into a storm. Diver came in quietly and saw Ray's hand lifted, and June's eyes already braced for impact. He stepped between them like you step between a dog and a snake. "We're not doing this," he said. Calm, "Not here." Ray's mouth turned into a schoolyard. "You gonna stop me, Pegleg?" he said, and laughed, and called him boy. Ivor moved in a way the mat had taught him, fast and close. He didn't punch, he rapped. He took Ray's center of gravity like you might take a bottle from a child and set him against the wall without violence, only instruction. "Stop," he said. He leave. June called the police with a steadiness that made Ivor ache. Red and blue pinned themselves to the house like a second Christmas. Ray left in a car with a cage and did not return. The next day, the team gathered under the buzzing lights of the room that had become their church. Salas spoke as if he were carving something out of stubborn wood. "We are not promised championships," he said. "We are promised the chance to earn the right to fight for them. That's it. That's everything." They went to regionals. The gym was loud and bright and cold. His breath made a small ghost every time he came off the mat. He wrestled like a man who had learned to be kind to his own fear. He stayed close in scrambles, never let a bad choice multiply. Accepted a stall call without letting it set up house in his head. He qualified for nationals in a bracket that made little jokes about destiny. June watched from the stands with a little American flag the school had given her at a fundraiser breakfast. She didn't wave it, she kept it still in her lap, like a thing that might flutter all by itself if it needed to. After one match she handed him a paper napkin with a heart drawn on it, and the words "proud of your oxygen" in her careful script. He didn't know what that meant until much later, when news came that funding had stabilized because alumni had thrown them a lifeline. The room exhaled, as one. Relief is a chemical that tastes like rain. The gratitude was real and complicated. Ivor wrote thank you notes to names he'd never know and meant every word. He also went back to work at Night Owl, because gratitude doesn't change rent. Nationals came like thunder. The arena was a bright bowl of exhale and light. Cameras looked for stories. They found Cole and they found Ivor and bent them into simple shapes. The golden favorite and the kid with the missing piece. Ivor wasn't offended. He understood how stories feed people. He also knew the quiet parts were the parts that mattered. Before his semi, Salas leaned close. "You know how to breathe?" "Yes," Ivor said. "Do it," Salas said. "And when the match gets stupid, which it will, go to the place inside that doesn't answer to stupid." He wrestled through with a precision that made his own teammates go silent. He didn't try to be beautiful. He tried to be true. When his hand was raised, the sound in his ears was not the crowd. It was his mother saying, "Wind holds you up." Finals felt like standing at the edge of a roof you have to jump from to prove something you can't name. Cole's face on the big screen looked older than his age. Pre-match, they shook hands, human hands that had both opened doors and held cups of coffee and then washed in sinks. "Good fight," Cole said, not entirely to him. "Good fight," Ivor said back. The whistle called them into a small universe. First touch was electricity. Ivor saw the space before it existed, and put his weight into it. He didn't chase the move that would make the highlight reel. He chased the position that would break the clock. Cole drove like a storm on a highway, intelligent and mean. Ivor's body listened and answered. They traded twos. They traded breaths. The whole place leaned forward and stayed there, as if leaning might help. Midway through the second, something happened that only a few in the top row saw. Ivor smiled. It wasn't joy. It was recognition. He had been here before, in the hallway with letters that began with "We regret" on a mountain with stone that didn't care if skin tore, in a kitchen where a hand rose and was met with a boundary. He knew the taste of this air. In the third, down by one and running out of time, he did not rush. He used the oldest tool he had, the patience of someone who has lived a long time next door to pain. He got to a tie he liked, felt Cole's weight tilt by half a breath, and turned the breath into a door. 2. The sound the crowd made felt like a stadium turning into weather. Cole scrambled to steal something from the last seconds. The clock got loud. Ivor's hands finished the truth they had been writing in chalk all year. The buzzer made a thin flat noise, and everything else was thick and rising. His name became a sound that belonged to many throats. He found Salas, who put his forehead against Ivor's, and said nothing for a long time. June reached him later, and held his face like the first day, as if she were counting fingers again. He cried, not because of a gold thing shining from a ribbon, but because air moved freely through a chest that had been practicing for this since it learned how to be a cage. He didn't dance for cameras. He stood still and listened to the room be a hurricane. In the interview that night, a reporter asked about his leg in a way that tried to be kind and tripped. He smiled gently. "It's not the most important thing about me," he said. "It never was." He walked back to the hotel under a sky scraped clean. A boy in the lobby asked for his autograph, and Ivor wrote it on a receipt because no one had thought to bring paper. The boy's father said, "You helped me talk to my son," and then left quickly, as if speech was a delicate thing that should be put away before it broke. Sometime after midnight, when the wind had begun to fade into the larger light of what came next, he took the elevator to the roof. The city was a spread of small fires. From up there, cars were slow comets, and people were stories you couldn't hear yet. He took the $2 bill from his wallet and held it up to the sky where the wind could see it. He laughed softly because he knew the bill would spend the same whether he had won or lost. Back home, weeks later, bills remained, and the little house persisted in being a house that needed hands. June enrolled in night classes and discovered she loved the architecture of ideas. She watched lectures in the quiet hour before dawn and made notes in a careful hand, as if knowledge could be braided. Ivor spoke to kids at the high school and told them nothing dazzling. He talked about tapes and tape residue, shoes that needed replacing, the way you sharpen empty rooms with your breath. He told them a truth that sounded small and was not. Show up, even when you are the only person who believes you belong. Ray existed now in words only, like a relative you tell a story about to warn or to forgive. He didn't call, he didn't walk back in. The house forgot his footsteps exactly the way it needed to. There were more matches in Ivor's life, and jobs that used his hands and his listening. He coached some, he fixed bicycles in a shop where the bell over the door had a friendlier ring than any doorbell he'd ever known. He learned how to take a fall when a kid overeagerly tried to show him a move, how to laugh when laughter was the only way to keep a boy from crying. He learned, again and again, that victory is a door that opens into another hallway with more doors. He would wake sometimes in the small hours and lie still, and feel the ghost of his missing limb, warm, impossible, present-like memory. He would breathe into the ghost and thank it for growing a man who had learned balance from subtraction. He would think of the mountain behind the stadium and the red rock that kept its counsel, of a gym where sweat had once mapped his face and evaporated into something like courage. And when the wind came through the window of whatever place he was renting that year, he would sit up, swing his leg over the edge, and listen. If you lean into it, it'll hold you up, June had said. He leaned. The air stayed. Our lives are not defined by the things that are missing, but by the rooms we learn to build around what remains. We don't choose every road. We choose to keep walking, to teach our hands and lungs how to stay. Some victories are loud. Some are quiet and private, and look like someone getting out of bed when the wind calls. If you listen closely, even the hardest day has a small place where the air lifts you. Keep your weight there. Keep going.